Okay, so it's my turn. I'm going to slow down. I don't like this fast stuff. But tomorrow afternoon, we're going to present from the Global Assessment Report of the UN what we've learned about global disaster risk over the last 4 years. We're going to talk about where risk is, risk patterns, which countries have more risk, which have less, big countries, but also small islands. Slow down, that's it. We're also going to look a little bit at the world of small and medium-sized disasters. So these aren't the large catastrophes, the Thailands and the Pakistans that reach the headlines, but these are the small landslides, flash floods, fires, which are the everyday bread and butter of communities around the world facing disasters. We have two fantastic presentations on drought in Africa. We're going to talk about all the hazards, but being here in Africa, we're going to have a special focus on drought in the session tomorrow. We're going to talk about increasing exposure, which we've learned is probably the principal driver of global risk around the world, not just on the China coast. And we're going to look at the drivers of risk. What are the factors that are really making risk go up or go down around the world? Poverty. How does poverty actually lead to risk construction and risk accumulation? How does urban governance lead to flash flooding in semi-urban squatter settlements and similar areas? And we're going to look at how the way we're treating the environment, how we're treating our ecosystem services is also one of the major drivers of global disaster risk. We're going to then look at trends. Is risk going up? Is it going down? Why apparently mortality risk seems to be going down? We're getting better at saving lives, but we're getting a lot worse about actually protecting our economies and livelihoods. Economic asset risk seems to be rising. We're going to look at how these risks then translate into losses. What are the loss trends in different parts of the world? What are governments actually losing? Schools, hospitals, other facilities, and how these losses then turn into fiscal impacts for governments. Why are governments, such as we just heard from the G20, starting to take notice? How is this actually affecting their own balance of payments? We're then going to look at how those impacts mean whether countries are more or less resilient. Why is it that some groups of countries, such as small islands, with their economies only in one single sector, seem to be hit much more than larger countries? And how the development trajectories of different groups of developing countries, rich ones, poor ones, converging and diverging, link in with these risk trends. We'll talk again a little bit about cascading risks, what we heard in the first presentation. And this is really what we don't yet know about risk. How can we model these scenarios of synchronic failures and sequential crisis? We'll talk about the progress which countries are making in reducing risks from a survey we do every 2 years of all the world's governments. Last time round, 130 governments contributed to this understanding. And we're looking exactly, providing evidence as to why we're not investing enough in reducing our vulnerability, particularly in low and middle income countries. We'll then start looking at something a bit more propositive. How can we actually use risk assessments, probabilistic risk assessments, loss exceedance curves? This is our model, we call them hybrid curves, to actually help countries make better decisions as to how they invest their money. We'll talk about why there's certain layers or strata of risk is worth reducing, why there's other it's better to insure, and why there's other it's only better to pray because there's not very much we can do about them. And finally, we're going to look at probably what's the biggest challenge of all, which is actually how we organize ourselves as states, as countries, as governments, and societies to actually address this issue. Because as some of the speakers said, the issue is no longer now technical, it's principally a political and organizational issue. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock, room 1.41. Thank you.